All right, this is the Gimbalabs Dev Standup. It's the 20th of March, 2025, and we just wrapped our open spaces session where we spend time on this page of the Gimbalabs Notion. But to access the work we're doing in this dev session, let me go back to the home page. Down here, we have our weekly dev stand-up. We started keeping a similar agenda for Aiken PBL, and Mix is doing a parallel experiment, keeping running agendas as tasks. So I thought that was pretty cool. But we're starting to have these different ways of keeping track of works in progress. So dev stand-up is right here. Here's our running agenda. Last week was the 13th. This brings us to today. Let's just say the 20th potential. Oh, date's in right now. I don't need to change that. So yeah, then we can make today's agenda. We've covered these things that have a date out, but we've already got a few agenda items here. So just taking a look before I pass it off to Harsha's here. Is Emmanuel here?
Oh man, I don't
Not
think
at
he
this
is. Ah,
time. Okay, that's all right.
I was sending him a note. I was sending him a note.
Okay. But yeah, so Harsha dropped one in around handling UTXO deployment and front end. That's beautiful. And you had a demo. We did a demo about this, no?
Yes, we
We-
did. So it was less of a demo. It was more of just like showing that here is the front end. I still need to try it and stuff like that. Yeah.
that's a really cool prototype of an admin interface, right? Any Web3 app is going to have some things that only people with certain access rights can do, and that's essentially what you've outlined there. Is there anything else you want to look at in that one today, or can we call that one out last week?
So I will come back with that next week because I still need to mint a bunch of admin tokens because I minted too few of them. So like there's a little bit more of work to do before I can test it out.
Cool. Well, so we can like with some level of confidence pencil that one in for next week.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Emmanuel,
But yeah.
go
Could I suggest one more thing to add, if we can get through today or
without a
next week,
doubt. Yep.
which is convergence for Project Asteria.
Yeah.
How like four of us are working, but I'm not sure how and where we'll converge, or if you have any suggestions.
Right.
Beautiful. Yep, making it like strategizing for that. That's really important, right? Like ways of working or what is the development framework? That's really a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, and we've got some ideas on how to do it. It's just, it would be cool to bring it up to the larger group of how actually Caesar with the PBL. Yeah, so that would be good to spend some minutes on.
Very good. Do either of you guys want to represent Emmanuel's point right here, or should we save that for when he's around?
Yes. He gave a practice session of this last Friday. Um, but I wouldn't be able to demo it. But basically, he's sort of going ahead and building out some mesh, like trying to refactor the Lucid into mesh and use it and trying to build up those hit those endpoints with the mesh
So the key thing I
structure.
think Emmanuel is doing is that he doesn't have an access to a local node, so he has to do everything to the wallet. So he has to
Perfect.
build like,
Yes.
yeah.
I have actually been there. Even though I can have access to a node, sometimes it just feels easier to build little one-off transactions in the front end. That's amazing. So I've been budgeting time to help with this part. So like you guys have really been running on your own. I'm signed on to advise, and this is something where I can definitely help, especially, now that he's building up some experience, he probably has some really good focused questions. So if he's able to, if
Yes.
we scheduled some time for tomorrow, he said he'd be in. This might end up being a focus of that time.
And that is the um like another sort of thing is doing the specific directed questions. So we've got that listed down. It's like, okay, part of our work is to get to specific directed questions for you and the other mentors. Yeah. And sometimes the mentor is ChatGPT, but it works both
Oh
ways.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Yep. All right, I'm gonna put this one. I'm gonna like this one is a maybe we get to it today kind of thing, and also upcoming. Newman, you want to say a word about this one?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, which one is it? Looking at the screen, it is okay. This is one of those. This was from our investigation yesterday, and it there is the difference between Euclidean geometry and Manhattan. No, Euclidean. Ah, geez, what's the name of it?
Euclidean distance and Manhattan
Manhattan
distance.
distance, yeah. And so we were like, hey, this function's wrong. Is this thing even working? And we're like, maybe it's just broken, and that's why we're not able to, no one will run it for us. And that we're finding problems with it. But we actually I thought it's basically the way they measure the fuel. Anyway, yeah, there's just some this might be a way, an avenue in for us talking about the code base and how you can see how we navigate it through. Um, uh, and so it might just be just, I don't know, 5 minutes of demo, as long as we can get set up pretty quick with getting everything in the shared screen and whatnot. Yeah, it's like how it's calculated, like where things are calculated. Is it in the on-chain, like in the validator logic,
Mhm.
or in the front end, like where, for instance, they have a utility, uh,
Yeah,
you
these
know what I
go
mean?
together. Yeah, the utils function. Yeah, this feels like great stuff to work on, right? Getting into the nitty-gritty, getting into some details. I think that's a great use of this time because it almost always generalizes too.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Harsha, I think we could probably get a demo of that. We just have to get back into that spot.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And Newman, did you want to talk about this Aiken design patterns repo from Anastasia?
So that is sort of at the other end of the scale of abstraction. Um, I would, like we could put that one on the back burner. Like I said, it's just a sort of review. And is there any? It seemed like we came across a pattern. You're like, oh, this is a pattern that we can use, or you highlighted something like that, maybe in the last one. Um, but I don't know. Yeah. So we could put that one down and use it as a sort of something at the end, maybe.
Yeah, good to have there. Anything else anybody wants to add? Adrian, Caesar, for now or for future?
Yeah, we can add zip 146, which is 143. Oh,
Oh, I was wondering
And
when it was
I
143.
think would be a good addition to the Anastasia Labs uh, repository. That is about the token freezing and yeah, how that can be done.
That could be cool.
And it's 143, not 146. So what, or was it both?
143, yes.
Okay. Okay. And Scott.
I just have a question as far as like this space and what its use is, because like the DREP is working on SIP 152, which is an extension to DREP metadata. It's extensions to the current metadata that we have for governance. If that's something to be like, I know if this is just a Gimbalabs specific space.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So this we really want to focus on dev tasks here. But here's
okay.
what we can imagine, right? If you guys are drafting something that might be a SIP and there's technical things you have questions about to understand, like the viability or some of the decisions you're making there, absolutely bring those to this space. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Good to know.
And it's fun to be thinking about all these different distributed, team functions. Project management is another one, but you could almost put on a project manager hat, right? And say, okay, I've got this project that we're trying to do. I always know I can bring it to this space to ask a development team about the viability. That's cool.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Mhm. This feels like a complete agenda for today, right? We never need to overstuff it. All of these things will take longer than we expect. One of them is going to take most of the meeting, but how does this order sound? Let's do a little jump into the Asteria code base, talking about this question and then looking at the utils function. Stay there for as long as we need to, and if other questions come up, we can play. And then we have a chance to look at a SIP together and see how it relates to some of this other stuff. Cool. All right. I'm going to hand it off to Newman and/or Harsha. Do one of you want to share a screen?
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. Champion. Yeah, we got into this yesterday, and it was, well, actually, there's a couple of things like how we got there, with asking the large language models and kind of going back and forth between two and doing this pretty cool like ask us questions thing, and it got us into a spot that we would typically I wouldn't have gotten into. It was a great sort of learning with these new tools, task, uh, or process. And so what Harsh is showing right now is the design document, which has been really invaluable. Um, and how did we start off? Let's see if we can let's take them in like how we got in here, because I do think that's valid.
um, Let me see if I can find that. We got into it by asking
Yeah, yeah,
Claude how just to help us understand how the game is played. And then it gave us some like instructions on how the game is played. And then we just started asking it questions that it should ask us so that we understand if we understand.
right. So here's the prompt. I need you, the talking to the GPT, start asking me questions about the working of Asteria, and I'll try to answer them one question at a time. And once it's clarified, we can move on to the next question. I mean, just brilliant. You're just like you're telling it like how to help you by asking these questions. And some of the questions are pretty easy, and some are like, I okay, yeah, right. How do they calculate the so and so, or what is the initial fuel? Where is that determined? And this is so. Yeah, here we go.
So, do you want me to go through each of the questions?
Well, get down. Let's just go down to that one with the. I think it is the first question, um, where the distance was, and it really clarified a misunderstanding of mine because I thought that it used Euclidean geometry, basically the Pythagorean theorem and a squared plus b squared equals c squared type of thing. And I was like, wait a minute, they're not using the right function. This function doesn't make any sense. And then they're like, oh, it turns out no, they're using a different uh, method for moving the pieces on the board. So you don't move diagonally in Asteria. You move along the you move uh up, down, left, right. You don't move diagonally.
Yeah, this is how they calculate the distance.
So
That's the Manhattan algorithm. There it is.
yeah, right. And so what there were some expanding kind of questions um based on that. So if we could look back in Asteria and uh where this utility is called. Yeah, do a search there. That would be it.
I forgot what it's called. It's called just distance. Okay.
So there's a constant, and I don't think that one's it. Here we go. Okay, so I think that's it, line 80. So it calls utils.distance and it feeds in the delta x and the delta y. And then where did we get those from?
Yeah, so that was my biggest question. How are we getting
Oh,
delta x and delta y? And because it's directly fed here, move ship delta x, delta phi. So that means we already know that x has changed this much and y has changed this much. But I'm not sure how they ended up with like the exact change. Did they somehow
right.
find the original x and y and
Yes.
subtracted it?
Yes. This
And
is
is it and so my speculation is because this is the on-chain, is that calculated in the interface or in on the off-chain and then fed in as you do the move, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's what we got.
If you think of a validator always just says true or false. So
Mhm.
everything that's calculated is calculated off-chain. And the on-chain stuff just proves yes, you calculated correctly or not.
Ah,
Maybe we should look somewhere here.
this
Um,
this is a really important line. Line 69 is really at the crux of this whole application, right? And it's a pattern we're going to use. Remember, this is a redeemer, right? We see it right there. And we know that every spending validator has one or more redeemers, right?
mhm,
okay.
And we can think of multiple redeemers as basically multiple endpoints, right? These are the multiple actions I can take. And over time, we've talked about a few different ways to interpret redeemer, right? But
mhm,
this is one of those cases where thinking of it as a statement of intent is really good, right? Just like I can walk into a bodega and state my intent, and they'll treat me differently if I say I want a cup of coffee versus I want to rob the place, right? We say with a redeemer, we're stating our intent for interacting with this spending validator. What is my intent on line 69? It's to move my ship this far on the X coordinate and this far on the Y coordinate.
Okay.
Connecting this to what Adrian just said, the validator is going to say, yeah, you can move it like that, or no, you can't,
Okay.
right? What our front end has to do is always it has to know what redeemer we're hitting, right? Anytime I fire a validator interaction from a front end, it's going to be to build a transaction. My goal is to build a valid transaction. But if it's a smart contract, right, I need to know what the redeemers are because I'm going to specify which redeemer I'm using from the front end,
Yes.
right? Now, sometimes a redeemer doesn't have any additional parameters, right? If it's just stay or go, right? I want to stay here, I want to go there, right? Maybe I wouldn't need parameters. This redeemer has two parameters. I want to move my ship this far X and this far Y.
Okay.
And so all of that needs to be encapsulated in the data we collect from the front end and place into our transaction,
correct.
right? And
Mhm,
you can imagine just skipping ahead to whatever the interface might be. If we have a grid on the user's screen and their ship is here, and then they click over here, it's the job of the front end to take that graphical selection and convert it into simply delta X and delta Y.
correct.
Re
Yeah.
yeah, relatively simple thing to do.
Exactly, right? And you can see how that part, yeah, the hardest part there is just designing the actual graphics, right? Like the, but once you have it, right, the end goal of it, I need to be able to click this cell and calculate these two values so I can send a redeemer to the validator.
Correct. Okay.
Love it. Love it.
Okay, so in the current way it is designed by Asteria, like transaction pipe, it still says it directly enters these numbers. So I'm just like wondering who is calculating? Is the user sitting and calculating, or is the front end calculating somewhere? Or
Wonderful. Okay, look, so
Yeah.
now they're taking a step towards abstracting this even further. And let's for just 2 seconds, let's ignore lines 19 to 24. And notice what do we have here? On line 18, we're defining a function. It's called move ship,
Mhm.
right? And what does it return? On line 25, we can see that it returns a promise TX hash.
Mhm.
Now, the promise part, it returns a promise because it's an async function. So the word async on line 18 goes with the line promise on line 25. Right? And we could go deeper into that, but for now, is that sufficient for thinking about async and promises?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
right. So now, when this asynchronous function eventually resolves, it will resolve to a TX hash. Oh,
Correct.
good. So this is a function that allows me not to build a whole transaction like I have to over and over again on Cardano CLI. This allows me to write a much user-friendlier function called move ship that'll produce a successful transaction.
Correct.
Now I'm assuming, I haven't looked at this function yet, but I'm assuming that somewhere in this function, a transaction must be signed. Is it in there? Or is this just returning the TX hash of a signable transaction? Unsigned transaction. Ship. So it builds the ship UTXO. That's fine. It reads from our parameters, right? Line 25 is just we're reading from some kind of uh, configuration file. Line 34, line 45, right? Those can be any kind of configuration file you want. There's a particular
Oh,
structure to them here, right? So Harsha's building that admin interface, for example, for creating reference scripts. And when you do, each of those has a reference UTXO, right?
Mhm.
That hash of that reference UTXO is going to be one of your configuration variables. Okay, this instance of Asteria works with this space-time reference script and this pellet reference script. And the beauty of that is sometime later, when somebody else spins a completely unique on-chain instance of Asteria, all they have to do is go to some config files and update those reference UTXOs.
ah,
Okay.
okay.
So
So
space-time ref TX hash, you can almost think of that as an environment variable. And there's all sorts of ways to handle this. Same thing with pellet ref TX hash.
mm,
Oh, they're in off-chain ref script. Here they are.
Yeah.
Uh, oh.
Now, are those the only values I would have to change if I wanted to use your front end with my on-chain instance? Probably not. It's not just reference scripts. There's a couple of validator addresses, and there's a couple of policy IDs that are also configuration variables for any given instance.
mm,
And so
Policy
I just,
IDs, reference scripts. Yeah.
yeah, and so I just want to demystify lines 34 and 45 in such a way that shows like they're making one design choice for how to pull in these instance variables.
mhm.
But there's nothing magical about the way they're doing it, and there's several different ways we can handle that. My personal preference is to have a single file that I can refer to with all of those instance variables. I don't want to have a folder full of files. I want a single one.
Right. So instead of Asteria pellet is spacetime dash reference dot JSON, just the whole Asteria ref dot JSON,
Sure.
just one file.
A
Yeah,
stereo
why not?
config. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely have, yeah.
So those decisions are ahead of you. And it'd be fun for you guys to think about like what would be your ideal developer experience? What do you want the config file to look like?
Yeah.
But anytime you want feedback or other ideas on that, that's something we can look at together.
Sounds good. Yep.
All right, so let's keep going. Now there's a bunch of other stuff happening inside of Move Ship. We're building a UTXO on line 51.
Okay,
Mhm.
where's that? Where is that? Uh-huh. So, oh, so that's the type ship,
Or
and
that's
it's
not building, I guess that's getting a UTXO, right? This is getting some ship UTXO that exists. And look, it's pulling in one of the props for the move ship function, ship TX hash,
oh.
right? So it's
Wait,
just
say that again. Wait.
Yep.
Oh, say that again.
It's just abstracting a step away, right? So obviously, move ship, and again, you guys are more familiar with the nuts and bolts of this implementation than I am, but
Yeah,
you can imagine the scenario. If I want to move a ship,
yeah,
that
yeah,
ship currently has one or more UTXOs that are relevant to it, right?
yeah.
Obviously, they're going to have to be queried, but clearly I want to write that business logic once. So what do? I write the business logic on line 51, starting on line 51, and then I abstract this move ship function that just needs a ship TX hash, right? So it's
Mhm.
all of these reusable lines of code inside of move ship, and we pass the necessary props to that function.
Makes sense. Yes.
Right? Now I'm just curious, like, okay, line 68, we calculate the move distance, fine, right? What else? Okay, we calculate the spent fuel, we organize some ship info, we create some new datum on line 77, ship output datum. Um, we build the units we need. Right, this is all the stuff. Yeah. And they're building the Redeemer. There it is. Look, line 94 here. Look, this is beautiful. Just pin this for just a second. Line 95, I want to come back to that in just a second. But then
Okay.
finally on line 98, we build a transaction.
Aha, there it is. New TX dot valid to collect from.
And what I would
Read
recommend,
from.
one of the best things you can do to build your mental model, I shouldn't
Mm.
say this. Let me report experience. One of the best things I ever did to build my mental model is try to make sure that I could translate directly from what you see starting on line 98 to a Cardano CLI transaction build. And when I'm trying to understand a library like Lucid or Mesh, my goal is to have a one-to-one correspondence in my head between how I would do this on Cardano CLI and how I would do the exact same thing in Lucid. Or in your case, right, you're translating to Mesh, but same thing. Now you can have all three of those representations of the same exact transaction, and you can see a perfect correspondence between those.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we build it, and then eventually we're done building it. Yeah, pay to contract, pay to address. That all makes sense. Okay, complete is when it's done. And there's the signing part. Okay, so finally, line 124, we sign the transaction. Line 125, we submit it. But Harsha, can you mouse over submit? If you
Just keep the mouse on it, it'll pull up
Yeah,
Oh,
the.
just keep the
just so we
mouse
can
on it.
see the definition. Is that installed? Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not
And the
installed.
IntelliSense.
Or maybe it is, yeah.
What you would see here, if actually, yeah, it's any, no, so it's not. It's not yet. But the return type of submit is going to be a promise TX hash, right? This
Mm.
entire function is returning a promise TX hash, right? And
Hmm.
we're returning on line 125. Does it make sense that a submit function would promise a TX hash?
Hmm.
Of course it does. Right? What happens after I successfully submit a transaction? Oh, I get a transaction hash, right? And why
Hmm.
does it have to be an async promise? Well, of course, I don't know if the transaction is going to be successful or it's going to succeed, all that, right? So that's why it has to be async. We're asking the user to do something, and we're waiting for on-chain data, and we're waiting for on-chain confirmation that at least our transaction was submitted to a mempool. So therefore, we have the return type up at the top, promise TX hash.
Right.
But all of those lines, that was like 100 lines of code that is now reusable in a call to move ship with these 6 parameters. And I would certainly rather just define these 6 parameters than write all of this logic over and over again. And so there's the two-sided question. One, it sounds like Emmanuel has taken leadership on writing a function just like this, but with mesh instead.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to hear your guys' preferences after we get to look at those side by side.
Right. How different does it look? Um, that was one of my, so in the mesh, I just been, doing the sort of building background knowledge, just going through the mesh tutorials and really digging into that library and the references, so looking up, select wallet from seed or read text file, like all those little methods. And I'm like, how I mean, are they I know they've got to be similar, but like, are there anything like super different than between Lucid and Mesh? I know that Lucid is possibly a little older. So have they changed much? How different are they? That's my sort of question. Um, yeah.
And that's a line of inquiry that we can just jump into anytime. Like,
And
yeah.
and then is it? I mean, it's interesting. It's like how much we want to learn Lucid, and then I mean, I guess we're going to learn them together because first you have to understand what's going on in the Lucid, and then you have to understand how to do it in Mesh, and then pull it over.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah. And now here's a question. Here's my question. How, like on the scale of one to of 1 to 10, 0 to 1, what is this difficult? Is this like super great boilerplate like that like is like a great educational code base to really learn? Are they I mean, should I trust that this is the great way to do it and this is working? Or should I be like, oh no, there's some things in here that are not good uh exemplar. I mean, we are being recorded, so I don't want to be like, oh yeah, this is
Oh,
all.
no,
But I
no,
did
no.
have this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is everything. I mean, there's a few ways to answer that question, but the thing I would think about is whatever TX Pipe's goals are, you know what your goals are,
yes, sir. Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
that this is reasonable. I would make different decisions. The reason I would make different decisions is my goal is to have a resource from which I can teach.
yeah,
And when I teach, my number one goal is helping people create mental models.
yeah.
So I would make a few different decisions here to make this look a little bit more approachable, But when I did that, I would already have in mind some future where I was going to be teaching a new dev how to use this code base, right?
Yeah.
And I would know the patterns I wanted them to understand.
Okay.
I know, for example, that when I look at the way they handled the dino.read text file in from this JSON, that feels unnecessarily distracting to me.
Okay.
And it's probably a more professional way to do it. But what I would
Right.
do is create a single config file so I could show people everything that makes an instance unique. And then I would just have that imported at the top of this document so that I already just had access to space-time TX ref hash.
Right. Right.
And then when we're using that in the code, it's just a few less lines to be distracted by, and I can really focus on the sections of transaction building.
Okay.
I would even disagree that this is more professional. Seems more DevOps role.
Adrian
We
invented
we
something
love
that, yeah.
we love TX Pipe. We love TX. Thank
No,
you
this is
for
not,
being a part
yeah.
of
Oh, this is,
it.
they would jump right into this conversation. I'm sure they'd have some really good insights for us. Oh, this is, yeah, this is great. Um, but all of that said, this is 100% a custom transaction here. Newman, to your point about
Okay.
like, is this a good blueprint? Okay.
Okay.
Now, because what are we doing? We're building a function called move ship. That is one of the transaction endpoints that our app has to hit. How
Yeah.
many such endpoints are there? Well, this is why weeks ago we talked about counting, okay, in all of the validators and in all of their script purposes, how many redeemers are there? That's the answer to your question. How many transactions do I have to build into my front end?
Right. Right.
Right? For Andamio, I know that the answer is 28 or so.
Whoa.
So we need to have 28 functions that look like move ship,
Right.
right? For Asteria, it's probably about the same. What's the number? Do you
It's five right here, five.
Well, it's five. Oh, it's only five transactions?
So this is
Ah.
for admin,
Right.
it's
There's a whole bunch
separate.
of admin ones.
Yeah,
Right.
but like
Oh,
for
so
the
for the
user,
user, there's only five transactions.
yeah.
Yeah. Move
Beautiful.
ship, gather fuel, mine Asteria, quit game,
Oh, wonderful. That's
or
a manageable set. That's so good.
yeah.
Okay. So these are the five transactions that have to work flawlessly every time,
Mhm.
right? For the user to have a good experience playing this game, these need to be perfect. And what I mean, I'm so excited for you guys. This is writing these in mesh is a perfect exercise.
Nice. And
So
it's in. Okay. Go ahead.
no, no. Well, so two
So,
more things I would say. One,
sure.
you decide if looking at the Lucid is helpful or not. You might find after you do one of them that moving directly from a Cardano CLI transaction, if you already know what it would be, to mesh is easier than also trying to account for Lucid. That's up to you to decide.
Okay.
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 The other thing from a blueprint perspective is in this transaction and any transaction, even though all of the logic is the same, it's organized by a predictable structure. So one thing we could do together is just go through here and add some comments delineating the sections of this function that are common to any transaction function.
Yep. Yep.
Mm.
I like that. I think, okay, but just to rephrase or just to sort of integrate here, CLI, Lucid, and Mesh, and then the sort of design, like the educational design decision, like how, I mean, we could start at Mesh and then try to pull in and see where, it comes in. We could start with CLI. That seems odd, or we could start with Lucid because will it match up? Okay, but I get that's becoming very clear. Okay, okay. Um, yeah, I will share this. This is sort of a when I've had a couple of sort of profound, memorable educational experiences. One comes very, very early, where I think we're learning like parts of speech, like articles and adverbs, adjectives. And one of the things they do, and I felt so cool, because I didn't work with like the kids' book. Like, the teacher was like, "Oh, just grab a part of your dad's newspaper and then just circle all of the articles or circle all of the adjectives." And but one, my dad flipped out when I did it, and but I just felt like I was working with the source. I was like, "Oh, this isn't a children's book. This is a real thing." And my dad's doing this in his brain, in the back. He's not thinking about those things, but here I am. So this sort of, like, this is how we play the game. So it answers that original question that Harsha and I were asking. It's like, okay, how do you play the game? Oh, okay, this. And we talked a little bit about this, Harsha, right? Like the back end of the front end.
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
you give us that before? Yeah.
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 And if you're building a T3 app, this is another design decision you can make. All of this transaction logic could be done on the TRPC side, or you can write functions that basically run in the client's browser. And if and when you guys are ready for that conversation, that's something we can look at together.
Sounds
I
good.
always default to in the browser.
That is why they designed TRPC.
Always do it. Always do it on the I love a offline first sort of thought. It's just, like, you can continue playing the game and then just upload this. And then this whole like state machine. That's another one that I got into. Like, oh crap, is this a state machine? And it just sounds so like
The whole
awesome in a way.
blockchain is a state machine.
Yeah. So, okay. So the transaction logic in the TRPC side versus functions in the browser or in the browser. TRPC in the browser. Okay. That will make sense.
How are you feeling about moving to the next one? We have enough food to eat for a
Yes, we
week.
do. Yeah, we do. You want to go to the next question, see what these guys can
This is
come up
so
with?
good, guys. Thank you so much for starting this project. This is golden. Yeah. We're building important new patterns together as we speak. This is really good.
I thought one of the best things was, this doesn't feel Gimbalabsy enough. I'm like, oh shit, you're right. And really, Jeremy, who's, but it's just something feels a little off about it. Like, what is it? That's and Scott's still here, so yeah, Scott. I think we could get out into something Gimbalabsy, and then it makes it much more interesting. Makes it much more interesting. And then that bit of advice of, like the incubator, like how can we like downshift, and like what's the first step in this process, and can we, yeah, we seems like we get to a more emergent thing than something that can merge. Harsha, did you want to go to the next question in that the
Yeah.
AI posed for us?
Yeah, no, not the AI. Like, I just want to go to convergence for a little bit. So right
Oh,
now,
okay. Yeah.
so this is our repo, and it's kind of messy. We did try to put some important things here, but this is just what I thought were important. But I'm not even sure if like it makes sense. So what we did here, the key things were like the reference script hashes that we created, these guys, uh, validator addresses for all the validators, uh, and the params that we entered when we were creating the validators. So these I thought were the important ones, and also the transaction hashes for the UTXOs we have been sending. So there is only one Asteria UTXO that's sent to the Asteria validator. So this is the transaction hash for it. But like I'm not even sure how to organize like the repo at all, to be fair. And
Right.
this is all Emmanuel's work, Mesh Asteria. He has on-chain docs and all of that.
Oh,
Uh,
Harsha, where is in your admin uh, front end stuff? That's in a different.
I just didn't want to like this is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
already
yeah.
kind of looking messy, so I didn't want to add to the mess.
Yeah, so there's our question is like how best to coordinate a team working on a thing. Um, I was on for my part, I was updating the README and there was some other stuff and then it just got to be confusing and I'm not strong enough in Git, so if something breaks or something gets out of the track, then I'm like, let's just nuke it from orbit and just start again, kind of vibe. Uh, so I just started putting that markdown Newman dash notes there. And yeah, so we're considering, so our plan, Harsha, you want to tell them our plan or
So initial like we thought since we haven't converged yet, we just like create like a folder for each of us, me, Newman, Andrew, and Emmanuel, and then put our work there. And then whatever goes into the common space, we just like consent on it and like decide what goes into the common space.
yeah.
But I don't even know if that's like a reasonable thing to do or not.
Ooh, the other one might be, I'm sort of anticipating. It's like, how would like how would, developers, seasoned, experienced developers do it? And I'm like, oh, maybe branches. So we would each have our own branch, and then we would pull request, merge request to the main. I like the
So that would
folder
mean
tech.
like we would need like an administrator that like accepts merge requests.
That's a good question for the gang, but I think, we can just give each other access. So we would do it, but it just wouldn't it would have to happen. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Like, how would that happen? Are these important questions to ask?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And now is the right time. So there's this repo. There's Harsha made like call it the admin demo repo. Is it okay if I call it that?
Where is that?
The one that you demoed last week where you showed us how to deploy
Oh, so
the
that's just on my local system. I didn't push it
not
anywhere.
pushed anywhere. Great, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's did we make a fork of Asteria to Gimbalabs that you guys have been working from?
No, this is
Great.
we just like
No,
yeah.
no,
Great, great,
that
great.
sounds
All right,
too
okay.
pro as
No, no, no. Okay. Okay. In ultimately, this project is going to produce a handful of unique repositories.
okay.
Okay. One of them is going to be the original Asteria code base itself, because that's where you're grabbing the validators from. You're not changing it too much, but it's nice to have our own fork of it so that as you guys are building the blueprints and applying parameters, that has a source of truth. Okay. Then coming soon is the actual application, right? So at
Mhm.
some point, we're going to run npx create T3 app, and there's going to be a T3 app that is the public facing output of the work we're doing here,
Mhm.
right? That needs its own repo.
Yeah.
And why is that not like the fork repo of Asteria?
Great
Like,
question.
Well, yeah, I can answer just so like it's our own version uh that it basically, I mean, I guess in one way it sort of like freezes it so we work off of that code base. So in case the code base changes and they change some stuff around, we've got this is the one that we're going to work with. And then it's just nice to have your own thing so that because we could do that with like a release, like we could function off the release that would keep it the same, I think. And then I don't know, it's just good to have your own thing instead of just using the source. Yeah. James, what do you think? That answer that?
That's really good. So Asteria by TX Pipe is a repo that includes a front end and the Aiken code base, right? We want the Aiken code base. We are rebuilding a front end. In a case like this, especially one where, remember the initial things we supposed are, hey, suppose we build a front end for Asteria using a T3 app and integrating with Mesh. Both of
Okay.
those are different decisions than what the TX Pipe team did with the front end they provided, right?
Correct.
Even if those weren't different decisions, it would already be easier to start from scratch, right? Like this is one of the most valuable things we can do here. You will learn more and minimize the frustration and maximize the learning time if you're building on your own architecture from day one. If your goal is to like refashion something that somebody else built, that's always harder, and you just spend a lot of time spinning your wheels, right?
Correct.
When we add to that the fact that we're building in a different stack and with a different on-chain library, then the choice becomes really obvious, right? You want to build a new app from scratch. You want to get a T3 app running with Mesh working in it. And then you want to start piece by piece building into it all of the Asteria functionality.
Okay.
So you got the original Asteria code base. You got the T3 app in PX create T3 app that ha that has and then what else?
Well, then you got the
This.
repo that's on the screen right here. What I would recommend,
Our
this,
project,
right.
our project
Yeah.
coordination. Yeah.
This to me looks like a really good rough draft of documentation already, right? You have a mess of different config files, JSON files, markdown files, and text files. It's perfect. It's serving its need. It's giving you all a chance to think and share notes with each other. Keep using it exactly the way you've been using it. And as you continue to use it, it will emerge as your shared documentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
And then what else? You said possibly 4. Is there
You need
another one that?
well, no, I mean this is really great. You need the on-chain code. You get that from TX Pipe's Asteria repo. You need the off-chain code that's all going to go in the T3 app. And you need
Okay.
documentation, which you can think of this as a first draft of it.
Got it. Yep. Okay.
If you ever want to pull in a documentation framework, that's a really fun thing to geek out on, right? What can I npm
Yeah.
install to give myself some go-to
Yeah.
docs? Or you might decide, actually, we don't want a repo for this. We want to put this all in Notion. Both of those are fine,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Anytime you want help with project management from that perspective, I'll show you how we use Git and Notion to manage the Andamio project. And that'll give you just some starting points for what you might want to try. So that's always an option.
Okay. Okay. Dig it.
And so basically we'll converge in the T3 app repo, right? All of us?
I think so.
Yeah. I think as we build the T3 app, the public facing, like our full app, which is in a separate repo than what this is, then that will be a more of a convergence thing, and we'll have to figure, you know, pull requests, merge requests. Like
Yeah.
then we really will be working on the same code base, meaning that we can't just create our own one. Perhaps that one's the one for branches or feature
Well,
branches or
I was thinking this earlier, Newman, when you mentioned that, right, about like just enough facility with Git, this is exactly the context for it.
yeah,
And I would love if this fits tomorrow. It sounds like you guys already have a list of things for us to cover tomorrow at the time we
yeah,
scheduled, what, 3 o'clock Eastern or something,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If there's not time for it tomorrow, let's do it soon after. I want to give you enough Git that you feel confident every time you jump into the code base.
Yeah.
Right. And it'll take us like 20 minutes to go through just a couple of things. I'll show you what it looks like. And then we can talk about even like one thing you'll want to do is set up contribution guidelines eventually. Right. So we could just talk about, okay, what is the process? And that way, everybody, when they jump in, they know that they're not going to break the good code, but they can completely explore with features and playing around with stuff without any consequences.
Okay. Good.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And that's
That
a
would be a
great
great
one. Yeah,
thing.
that's a great one.
All
And
right.
then, and then, I have my, it's like, how like when you're driving a car, it, when you let go of the wheel, it just drifts to the away. So you smash into the railing and not an oncoming turn. My brain like goes to the context and like bigger picture things. So it stays away from detail, goes to the bigger picture. And I think that in the project, like a prerequisite, like a Git course, you're like, I'm at 20 minutes and I'm gonna give you everything you need to know to feel confident. Like that to me feels like a prerequisite. And whether it's the first module that you go to the next one and the building background knowledge, or like a separate course. Is it a separate course in Andamio, a separate course in somewhere else? Is there some other course that could generate a credential? Yeah, I've been working with Git for a long time, and it it
And we are still here.
we're still here. We're still here. But I think that the project, um, I think that there's better, like meaning that this project and being, having like an actual code base and a real reason to do pull requests, that it only makes sense and therefore is only relevant when you're working with a group of 4 people in different time zones, et cetera, et cetera. So like, I get it now that it's like, oh, right. It's like you're trying to learn something that just doesn't, it's not really relevant. You're working by yourself. Like, why would you need to learn pull requests? Barely would you need to learn, like some of these other little things because yeah. So, and that's what I'm looking forward in that sort of 20 minutes. It's like this is how Git works when you're working with a group of 4 people on a code base where there's good code, where you want to be able to explore and do things, and you don't want to mess up the good code or cause problems. Basically, here's how you don't cause problems, right? That's a big part. I'm looking forward to that lesson.
And that question is harder to answer the bigger the project gets, right? When you can hold a whole project architecture in your head, you're less afraid of like screwing something up because you're like, well, I know how all the pieces fit together, right? At a certain
Ah,
point, when a code base gets too big to hold in your head, you're like, I don't know if I'm screwing anything up over there. Harsha built this great feature. Is my change going to break that, right? What we need to get to is the point where you can say, well, I might break that other thing, but I don't know the whole picture, but I feel pretty confident I can zoom in right here. I can make sure it works, and then I know how to just double check that it didn't break anything else.
yeah. There was a great open source project that Lawrence Lay started or was the architect. Um, the litter open litter map,
Mm.
and he would do that was his thing. It was just like every week he's merging pull requests, and he would just go through and show like this process. I didn't have the context the knowledge just yet to understand it, other than recognizing that it was wicked cool. And super whip smart dude, Sean, to be able to do it on the fly with the live cameras rolling and just like, oh gosh, you know, super, super real live stream basic, kind of thing. Yeah. And I
Um,
wonder if they're still doing that.
can I just show you some like naked baby photos so you can see like how far we've
Yeah.
come with so here.
Oh my God.
Because and this is it's 100% natural when you start building a code base for it to be a hot mess. Because
Sure.
you start building something, the goal is just to deliver something that works.
What is this on the screen?
This is a open source app called Lazy Git,
What?
right? So
I like it already. I
yeah,
like it already.
instead of using the Git commands directly, it just wraps them in a lazy little UI. Okay, so I've
What
got
the
the files
shit?
I'm currently working on, the branches I'm on, and the commits. Right now, I'm on a branch where I'm refactoring all of the tables in Andamio.
Hmm.
Because I'm in a branch that's only for that feature, I'm working fearlessly.
Yeah.
If right, if I broke everything, I would just delete this branch and dev would be fine. And dev has to be perfect before it goes to pre-prod, and pre-prod has to be perfect before it goes to main, right? So we have all these filters to get out to app.ondamio. I'm off here in the corner on something that if I screw it up, nobody's ever going to see. But that's for later. That's something we'll look at together. I wanted to show you this commits log down here. And I wanted to show you that if I scroll backwards in time, how bad this looks. Look, fix this, merge this, merge this. What? Nested fix, merge, merge? What? And why are things are repeating? What the
Yeah.
hell? What's going? Oh my God, look at this just mess. This was only like 10 days ago.
Oh God.
Okay. Because I was still learning this stuff and I wasn't focused on it.
Right.
Right. And so this is just gonna happen when you're just going nuts, building as fast as possible. But what I'm proud of is look at the more recent history. We
Yeah.
released version 1.0.2. We began development of 1.0.3. And ooh, look at the history since then. Jingles
Mhm.
did a thing. I did a thing. What MA is that? I think that's Andrew. Andrew did a thing. I did a thing. Caesar did a thing, right? And then I checked out. This means I jumped off of main right here and I started doing some other stuff. Okay.
Beautiful.
This isn't that beautiful? And so what I can do now that I learned this recently and I've been really religious about it for the last 10 days, I can show you guys how to do this part. And it'll feel really good to jump in and see a history like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. What do you think, Harsha? I think that looks pretty cool. I would love
Yeah,
to
that
learn that.
looks, I mean, if we can get to that stage, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I still feel like yeah, I genuinely feel like we're still in the research phase still.
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel all right about that. I mean, because my target is to like learn all this stuff and to be, interacting, just doing the relational sort of stuff. Uh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it'll come together quicker than we might think. But
Yeah, before we jump into Adrian's SIP, I have a small question, James. So when we are building, say for example, I built the deploy pellet UTXOs. So now how do I test it? Do I actually have to send the UTXOs to the actual validator address? And if I do, how do I recreate the validator address? Because the parameters that we put in, I already put in. So I'm not sure how to test that.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. So you deployed some reference scripts.
Uh-huh.
And when you deployed those, you were deploying scripts, obviously, that already had parameters applied.
Correct.
Okay. And now you
Mhm.
need to know the validator address that goes with those reference scripts.
No, I know the validator address, but if I have to test if my front end is doing it right, now I'll fill up the real validator address that I have created with like these random UTXOs. What if they're wrong? Now I have to like go through a process of
Well, you're going to build an application that only sends valid UTXOs to your validator address eventually, right?
yes,
So
yes.
the goal is, yeah, you're going to fill up the validator address with ideally the right UTXOs that have the
Mm-hmm.
right datum for that validator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes as you're building a front end, you might make a mistake, right? Where the transaction you build into the front end gets the datum wrong by a little bit or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That will happen. And then you'll have, a UTXO that's just locked at that validator now. That's okay,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
That's what testing is for. Now, without learning much more, yes, you can jump into exactly what you just described, right? You know how to build transactions. You have
Mm-hmm.
these concepts, and yeah, to test, you can go directly onto pre-prod, start running transactions, locking, unlocking, make sure everything works as expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anytime that feels too inefficient, you can jump to using a better approach, right? Like simulating a blockchain locally on your machine for local
Mm-hmm.
testing.
Mm-hmm.
That, for example, YACI, like Yasi, the Yasi
Uh-huh.
dev kit. Have you seen that phrase anywhere?
I was like Sidan Labs is where I saw it, but
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it. Yeah.
Right. Adrian has experimented with a bunch over the years. This, I think, is the most accessible one yet.
Mhm.
Okay. And when you hit the limit of feeling like, oh man, it's just too efficient to be testing things on pre-prod, that's when you're ready to say, all right, I'm going to spend a few days making sure I can run Yahtzee and test my app from there.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Adrian, have you played with Yahtzee or are you still, what do you use these
No,
days?
by now I haven't played with it. I currently use Atlas and they have everything set up to have a really quick spun up of the private testnet.
How fast could right like a front end developer pick that up and use it?
You mean Atlas?
Yeah.
I don't think that's something for a front-end developer
Okay. Yeah.
because you need all the, you need to build have a Haskell project, and I think, that's not worth to do it.
That's helpful. Yeah.
I think private testnet, the one we used for longer, I think that's easier for, yeah, testing. But I haven't played with Yahtzee. No idea how easy that is.
I haven't spent much time with it. I got it up and running on my computer in 15 minutes and I was satisfied, but I haven't used it for development yet. That would be a fun thing for us to do. Yeah, when you guys say you're ready, that would give me I would love to have a chance to play with that.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yep. Yep. Are we ready for the sip?
Can we do a 3-minute look at the basic idea?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Should we go first with the SIP or start with the Anastasia Labs code design
Oh,
patterns?
no, let's do SIP.
Yeah, we've got
Yeah,
just a
this
few
is
minutes left. Let's take, why don't you introduce the SIP, give us something to think about, and then we can keep it going next week on that topic.
yeah.
It's good.
And I put the link there in the Notion.
So I think a good starting point would be to just read the IHK blog. So
Okay.
the idea came up, or the idea to freeze and size different tokens came up after, I think it was Wyoming. the state of Wyoming, who published a list for blockchains that can be used to build a governance token or governance stablecoin, where they have control over it. And Cardano community, or some of the Cardano community, were a little bit pissed because Cardano was not included. And the reasoning for that was that it is not possible on Cardano to freeze assets. So, for example, your US dollar Tether can freeze tokens if they are used by malicious actors or someone who should not use them. And so the Cardano community or some developers thought about implementing something like that or do something in that direction. And they came up with some different ideas and also some drafts of CRPs to make that possible on Cardano. And the best SIP they had or they made, I think it was IHK and Anastasia Labs, is SIP 143. There's no hard fork needed or anything. The only thing they do is they more or less just lock the tokens in a smart contract address. And every time you want to send or receive, you want to send one of the tokens, you have to use the validator logic of that address. And therefore, you can freeze or size the tokens. And the main reason why I looked into it is because they have some design patterns, or they worked out some design patterns which are useful. And that's also why I thought it would be good to first have the Anastasia Labs design patterns.
Oh,
Look at them.
So just to clarify my understanding, so now the logic is actually connected to the tokens and not necessarily to an address?
So currently, if you think of a Cardano token, it's a native token. So
Correct.
if you have it in your wallet, then you can
Mhm.
do whatever you want with it.
Correct.
And the idea behind this CRP is that you don't have it in your wallet, but you have it at a validator address, and therefore the logic of the validator applies to the token.
Oh, s- but you can use the tokens as if they are in your wallet.
Uh,
uh-huh.
yes, at least if you are a good actor, but if you are a malicious actor, for example, you got the token from hacking Andamio or whatever, then you could be blacklisted and you cannot use your tokens.
And on there, on in the validator, logic, because I like, what would there be like a giant list of addresses that could, or wallet addresses that could be that could
There
use?
would be additional validator which would hold a linked list.
Aha, storing the list
That
of frozen accounts as a linked list. Oh,
this list would be always input to the transaction you're using. Or not the whole list, but the uh, the one list where you would be in, or your address would be in. So it would be ordered. So there would the first element would be A, which would point to B, and B would point to C, and so
hmm.
on. And if your address starts with B, then you would have the element where B points to C in that address. And because it's ordered, you cannot, you would be in that point of the linked list and be blocked. Or you would be in that element.
Interesting. Okay.
No, but every time I see freeze and seize, I get like very skeptical. I'm like, who's trying to control my money?
Yeah,
So
I totally agree. I think that totally goes against blockchain ethos. But how they did it, it's just like you can use it, but you don't have to. You can use
Right.
you don't have to use that token that's issued
Right.
by this or that government.
And we want those kind of features on native assets. And this
Yeah.
could never be applied to Lovelace itself.
Exactly, because yeah, and to no other token that is already minted,
Right.
you would have to follow the logic that's written to this CIP.
Is it
Every native asset still is a native asset.
right?
I'm
Yeah.
curious if whoever uses this will actually announce that they're using it, because essentially what you're doing is you're just going to create a token that allows you to flag every criminal, every person you think is a criminal in a community.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, I mean, sure, you can sell some tokens, but at some point, someone will say, hey, my address is blocked. What's up with this token?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree with Scott. Like, if we need to know that these are like freezable tokens before we even use them, yeah, that's right.
And I think, not sure, I haven't digged all too deep into the CRB itself. I think they also have like a token registry where you have to register to that registry, and then you can use that pattern.
Interesting.
Truthfully, the only way I can see this being, I mean, I'm sure there are other cases, but I think its use case really is for regulated institutions to operate within Cardano.
Yes, for sure, but also for stablecoins like US dollar coin. How is that? The SIP.
USDC from Circle.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Because that was one reason for them to not go to Cardano, because they cannot use that. As it, yeah, and I think it also makes sense for a dollar-backed stablecoin because you somehow have to control it.
Well, and then you kind of get into the whole process of everything, right? What proves somebody is criminal in their actions and stuff of that nature. And then it's like you just open Pandora's box for tokens that are based on this particular SIP. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Circle's justification is, but my understanding is Tether can do it as well. And that's
Yeah, I think
freeze
they
assets.
I think they have to have the capability to be somehow legally.
Okay.
Maybe a little fun fact. If you mint an Andamio access token, we are also using a linked list under the hood.
Oh.
So Andamio can block all my
No, no.
wallets.
No, no. No, just the pattern of a linked list that you have uniqueness.
Would y'all do that for credentialing? Isn't that correct? Like to track credentialing and such?
Credentialing? I don't think.
I mean, so yeah, you said on Domio, right? So like the person needs that token, and basically are there credentials associated? Yeah, they got to be associated with that token, with that Ondomio platform token.
Exactly, yes, exactly. They are living in a datum at a validator, but with SIP 68.
So
And you're using the linked list that you have a unique token name.
yeah, because that's what I thought about. I was like, oh, well, we do it, or the way I've seen it done is with the sort of pair, like in Asteria, there's the pair token. The I always assumed that I always thought of SIP 68 like that. Does that have an overlap here?
In this CIP, no. But there was another CIP that was wanted to implement it with a SIP 68 token, the freeze and size capabilities.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay.
Oh, so whoever has the admin part of the token, they can control the other half.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay. It's fascinating. I love the backstory that, Wyoming said, "Hey, you guys get, the reason why we're taking you out of the running for this Wyoming stable token is because of this feature." And then they were like, no, wait a minute. And then they figured out how to do it. I think that's really cool, you know,
Yeah, that
and in a decentralized way and in a Cardano-y kind of way. It's cool.
especially in a way where you don't need a hard fork or anything, just with all
Yeah.
the logic we already have.
Right, 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 right. Okay. Yeah. Didn't require any governance action, like make a change. It was like with the existing code, we could do this. And I mean, this is brand new, Adrian. This is like March 11th is when this was put out, this blog post anyway. Um, is it out in the wild? Are people using this? Is this something
Uh,
that we could play with or like
what do you
test?
mean exactly? So, for example,
But
this, oh, you mean the token itself? Yeah, I think they are already on mainnet, at least with some test tokens or something.
right, right.
Play a little bit with the system.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And is there a way, yeah, yeah. Is there a way to look and see where it's being used, like without being somebody saying, "Hey, this is what we're doing. Can we, you know,
Yeah, so the more or less the thing that they proposed with this CRP is one system, so that you have one address where all the you Newman have one address where all your SIPs 143 tokens are stored. And yeah, that's done by using the same address for all the tokens that have this CIP. So you have one registry, and the idea is that if you have one address, it's a smart contract address. Therefore, normally wallets could not interact with it that easily and would not show your balance in your wallet. But with a CRP, you could just follow one address or yeah, write the logic for that one smart contract to send tokens in the wallets, and therefore, yeah, you're incentivized to use that one address or that logic.
So they would have like a meta address, and everybody's address would be like a hash of that contract address. Is that how that works?
Yeah, somehow, yeah, not exactly, because they would use your public key hash as the staking part of the other address and make sure with this pattern also that only you can use that token, these tokens.
and and maybe that's where that what you were talking about with the A follows B follows C follows D, like uh that feature, that sort of does it have to do with this? Uh,
No, not really.
okay.
Yeah, that was the idea behind first you should look at an Anastasia Labs patterns because
Haha.
here again some nice patterns used.
Can you
Okay.
put, would you mind posting the link to the article that you're using?
I've got it right here, bub. I got it.
Okay.
Yep. Put it in the chat. No.
Thanks, Newman.
Yep, you got it. And I can also put the well, there are links to the SIP in there, I think. This is the one that you want.
Yeah, they're in the article.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Nice. Yeah, I kind of forget about the old IO. Um, log.
Yeah, this is a good one. Yeah, Adrian, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah,
That gives
I
us a
mean, I
good
feel
reason to pick up with design patterns there next week.
I think so. Yeah, my brain is probably cooked,
Hmm.
and I I with this in mind, like to look through it. It's I can share the link just if you guys want to get it into your thing. There's a link on that page, but just if you're interested, put it in there. Um, for whatever reason, I think it was this whole UTXO indexer was what brought us there. But then I was like, oh crap, there's all these other ones,
Mhm.
and this might be a good sort of high level discussion or something that could, like, okay, you can basically what I'm hoping to get is like, oh, parameter validation. That's what we're doing. Um, on Asteria, where you can say, oh, look, they're using something like this in Asteria, or they're not using this, and possibly we could include it. Likewise with all these little things, they're just great patterns or tools,
Yeah.
instances to play with, to kind of work with and see. Uh, and like we see, it's like being developed as we speak. So, all right, I'm gonna go out there and see if the spring is really here.
Woo! Good.
Yeah, man, springtime.
Good.
Um, yeah, I'm hoping
Um,
hope for good things.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm enjoying these epic Thursdays. Thanks for doing governance and tech talk back to back.
I appreciate the kind words. I think that was fun. I'm Harsha and I have got a good thing going. Oh, what about next week? Next week will be the sort of big review. Um, I don't Harsha, what do you think? We can do it and just we'll kind of softball them up for James to sort of, or do you want to take
are
the
you are
helm,
you, are you
James?
talking about open spaces?
Yeah, yeah. Should we
Up to
sign up
you,
for open
James. Like,
space?
if you feel like you want to host, you can. Otherwise, me, Newman and
Oh,
I can. Like,
guys,
up to you.
I'm so excited to hand it off. No, and you guys have a good thing going.
Okay.
So it's the last Thursday of the month is what
Yeah.
Newman's referring to, right? So typically that's project review. But you guys are the facilitators lately, right? So we can also recognize that there's a few key proposals that are probably ready for consent and try to move very quickly through project review, or we could go through consent first and then project review, whatever feels right. Maybe we hold off on deciding until we see the state of those proposals early next week. And if they feel like it'll
Yeah.
be ready for consent, then we can just go for it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And one of the things that I would like to do is to touch base with the owners of those projects and say, hey, look, it's the end of the month. Drop by open spaces or async record something or some way of just saying, oh, like this is where it's at. And I imagine we might clean up the board some. It's like, oh, there's a bunch, God love him, Alex, he's got a ton of projects, beautiful, and but he may be able to sort of squish them into their right area. Yeah.
And the thing we keep not doing is making sure that everything is tracked in Andamio. So I was starting to think like there might need to be a time when like those of us in the admin channel just get together and make sure that we're actually doing that. Because I don't know how to make it happen at open spaces. There's so much else to do, right?
Yeah.
So we got to think about when to catch up on all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's important. Maybe a little bit in tomorrow in the Asteria, to make sure that Emmanuel got in because I know that was, and he was like, let's make sure we do it before, and we tried. He got somewhere with it. I know that there was a sticky transaction, and so maybe a little bit tomorrow in the 90 minutes might be great.
Looking forward to that.
Um, projects.
All right,
Ooh.
I'm going to run just because I feel like James has been doing this for I don't know how many hours. I think 6
Oh my
hours.
gosh.
We're good.
Jeez Louise.
We're getting things done. There's lots of momentum. It feels really good. All right.
Nice.
But
Nice.
yeah. All right.
All right.
Talk soon, guys.
All
Ciao,
right,
y'all.
see you guys.
Bye. Bye. Thanks.